I'm really happy to be here and talking with you about this is my favorite topic, thinking outside the virtual training box. And in this session, it's my intention that you not only experience but learn about some practical techniques to engage your participants and encourage them in a virtual environment, because I think that typically tends to be a challenge for most of us. And there are two scenarios that I think most of us want to avoid. And so the first one, of course, is the snoozer. So this is the person where like we haven't heard from them and we're like, okay, are they taking a nap during, during my training? And then the second one, of course, is what I call the multitasker. So she's the part-time participant, right, who is probably doing some other things and we just don't have her attention. So that's, kind of the two general scenarios. So anyone have any other scenarios that you would like to avoid? You can type it into the chat when you're, when you're thinking about either creating your virtual training or delivering it. Anyone have anyone identify with those two scenarios? Am I able to see all the chat? I think I am. Am I?
So Dee said that yes, she and Michelle's agreeing.
Yeah, here we go.
Experienced both.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's just coming through. Okay. Good. Perfect. Let's see. And then we've got Tom. People act like penguins waiting for another penguin to be the first to jump in the water. That is very true. There is something sometimes about that people get extra shy, I think, in that virtual environment. Okay, great. All right. So this is where I want to focus this session today. And the first, I just want to highlight three habits that I typically see in virtual training that I think need to change. And they were certainly things that I did along my journey. And then I want to spend a good amount of time on translating like in-person activities to the online environment, because I think that's where a lot of us get a little stuck, and certainly that's the trouble that my clients have, and that is my specialty because it's a lot of fun. I love that kind of a challenge. And then looking at extending learning before and after the session, and then some tips on managing the in-session engagement. And before I do want to get to know a little bit more about you. All of you have taken the time to join. So this is a little bit about my background. And as Paul said, I've been in training and development for like over 15 years. And well, actually, I think it's been 20 years now. And I just had to think about, so 20 years ago, I was working for Comerica Bank, and they had hired the VP of Learning and Development. And I don't know what came over me. I realized that's where I need to be. I didn't have any background in anything, and I barged into her office and I said, "Hi, I'm Corena. I want to work for you." Luckily, she had a good sense of humor, and she went, "Oh, okay, I should probably talk to HR." So I started out as a learning coordinator, but I was so excited when I became a member of ATD. So that was, really important to me at the time. And I've either done when GoTo training launched for Citrix, I was at the ATD conference because marketing was like, "You're the one who knows this product, come talk to the people about it." So in one capacity or another, and then of course I was on the board for ATD-LA. So that was all. It's just been, it's just such an important organization because it allows us to network with our peers. And we all know some of the challenges that I think the learning departments have, like around budget and time, and people do not, the rest of the organization often does not appreciate how much work goes into developing training, and they just don't get it. So it's sort of like we make everything look easy and good and awesome, and then we have like the tiniest budgets and still make it look cool. So a shout out to all of you for that. And the other thing around that too is when the bank started moving some of the in-person training online, and I was, I'd been moving up and started to do my own training courses. I totally dug in my heels, and I was like, no, virtual training doesn't work. I didn't want to be a part of it. So I'm one of those people like who move my cheese. And so it's just kind of funny that after all these years, I'm extremely passionate about it, and I've made this like consulting business out of it because I love it so much. On a personal side, I'm fortunate to live in Santa Barbara, and I spend my free time taking a lot of pictures and oversharing on Instagram. So that's what I do. Okay, so, but I'd love to hear now some things about you. And the first thing is if you can type into the chat, I'd love to hear, just one thing that you're proud of in your training career. And even if it's, if you've just started out, yeah, I mean, I know there's got to be something that, some accomplishment or some kind of challenge you solve. I'd love to hear that. So that's number one. Go ahead and type that into the chat. And the second, I'd love to hear just a favorite activity that you do in your spare time. So let's see, I see here, oh, developing a leadership program at our bank. That's a lot of work. So good for you. Walking is your activity. That's for Michelle. And let's see. So Susmita, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Susmita? Susmita? Let's say
I think you're one of those who did achieve it. Thank you.
okay, good. All right, so you took a job that I'd never dipped my toe into, product and sales training. Oh, good for you. Okay, yeah, that's a definite different thing. Building my first training website from scratch. Oh, learning blues guitar. Nice. That's good. Let's see. Develop 20 online workshops for sales, new hires within. Oh, that's why you needed that yoga, but good job. That's a lot of work. Great. Okay. I'm reading through these here. Painting in your spare time, managers asking to come to our, oh, so Joe says managers asking to come to our management programs. Yes. And Lynn says learning Camtasia and creating online learning. That's and visiting. Oh, and you like to visit gardens and taking pictures. Oh, okay, cool. All right, good stuff. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then for this next, what I'd like to know is the type of training that you do. And so I'm going to give you all the draw tools. I'll give you pen. So you should all have the pen option, and you can just put an X in all of these boxes that apply to you. So what type of training do you typically do, and you might do more than one. So are you doing just internal? Are you doing internal and external? Are you just doing classroom, or maybe you're doing blended? So does everyone have has the draw tools that they can just mark an X on my screen? You should be able to click on. Let's see, Paul,
Where do I find
do
that?
they have draw tools? Oh, here we go. I think I had to do it. I had to check it. Okay. This is what happens. You know how we were just talking earlier today because you were talking about WebEx?
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh, there it is. Okay.
yeah, because I use GoToWebinar like all week long, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I have to do these things to go to training. Yeah.
So there you go. If you're not seeing it, folks, on the go-to training doc on the right side of your screen, there are some icons. There's a microphone icon, a camera icon, such and such, and then there should be one icon that has a drawing tools menu, and you can go ahead and select a pen, a highlighter, or an arrow. So, select a highlighter and go to town. Well, you can change the pin color too.
Yeah, and usually what happens, because this is what I see here, is everybody's doing everything. Because they're usually asked to do, oh, can you do this? Oh yeah, sure, because it's not different, is it? Nope, do this too. So, oh, excuse me, yeah, you might be, if you're using the, you might not
Oh,
see it if you're on through the browser.
and thank you for reminding me. Who was it? Sugar. Karen. Karen is looking at this off of her iPad. So there's an interesting conversation that I think that can pop up with respect to managing the different environments in which people can access a webinar,
Yeah,
because that changes how we interact.
that's a good point. Yep. But go ahead and, for those of you who can't use the draw tools, you can certainly type that into the chat, the kind of, if you want to focus on or highlight a couple of areas. Um, okay, so I'm just going to take a look at this here. So it looks like just a lot of, okay, so a lot of internal, and then some technical, but also classroom and blended. So that seems like and technical is kind of the big, not too much soft skills. Okay, good. Because a lot of times just in technical or with virtual training, we typically use that when we're teaching, technical skills like, whether it's customer onboarding or, how to use Excel or something like that. So okay, so Edith is saying internal, classroom, blended, soft skills, Terry, classroom, and then blended mainly. Okay, great. All right, thank you so much for doing that. All right, so we're going to erase all that. All right, and then let's see, Paul, do you have the poll that you can launch? So then my last question is, I'd love to know which training platform that you use. Do you have the poll that you can launch? There it is. And then I have it in a very tiny window. Let me see if I can expand that a little bit. And let's see, it looks like Susmita, we use Docebo. I've never heard of that one. That's interesting.
Docebo.
Docebo? Huh.
Mhm.
Where are they based?
They basically in UK and also I think in Atlanta.
Oh, okay. Holly's using Blackboard and Zoom. And Tiffany, we're about to switch to Docebo. Okay.
Yeah, I should have
All
thought
right.
about that, Dee. Some people do use more than one.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, I totally. Oh, because it was please select one.
Yeah.
So do we have the results up? Did everyone respond?
Looks like got 82% voting right now,
Okay.
and all of a sudden it went down to 78. Interesting. All right, that's good enough for a sample,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. We've got some Skype for Business and Adobe Connect. Okay. So let's see here. Okay, so more WebEx and then some Skype for Business and Adobe Connect. Okay. All right. How does everyone feel for those of you using Skype for Business? Is it just something probably your IT chose and it was sort of like, here you go. It's good for training too. Or, for those of you using Skype for Business, I'd be curious to know about what your thoughts are about that. Because I have trained companies, who do trainers who use Skype for Business, and I have trained them on using it. So, okay, so I see that it's quick and easy. Yeah, it's our corporate sanctioned tool. Okay. Not okay. So Michelle is I love it. I love Adobe Connect, but not a fan of Skype for Business. Yeah. Yeah, it can be. So my experience with it, and the reason why I'm asking, I just, as an outsider training into the company, I've had problems personally, like just with technology. Like sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And for some reason, it's just has to do with I'm outside the organization, so that can be a little tricky. So, but there are a lot of what I did like about it. There were a lot of really good things like the whiteboard and just some tools that made it really easy to interact. So that's good to know. Okay, great, thank you. Um, you can close the poll, please, and then we'll move on. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you so much for letting me know about that. I know there's a workbook. It's just a simple, sort of handout for you to take notes. So if you happen to print that out and want to take notes, that's great. But it's also in the materials if you didn't get a chance to do that. If you look in your control panel, it's there too. All right, so let's look at the 3 habits that I see that need to change. And the first one is, so if I say that the first habit that I see is creating your training for the software. Does anyone know what I mean when I say that?
We
And if
spend
not,
too much time on creating, on exploring the different functionalities and applying every functionality we find to make it much more beautiful is what we think and more
that's
attractive.
a good, okay, that's a good, I mean, I think you're on the right wavelength to what I'm getting at. Yeah. So and then so Terry, so I think that's a really good point. And Terry says thinking of media before content, and so that's exactly what happens, and it's just a natural thing because we are, we know that we have a training that we need to develop, and we know that it's going to be delivered, across all the remote offices. And so what happens is we start thinking about the tool itself. So we spend too much time on that. So what needs to change there is we really need to focus. We need to go back to our instructional design process, and we really need to focus on the participants first, and really not think about the delivery method until later. So we'll take a look at that as we go on. So the second habit that I see, and I did this myself when I was first doing GoToMeeting training, is what I call flight attendant syndrome. So what happens is that we turn our training into like a one-way presentation or a lecture style. So I always kind of do my flight attendant and I say, welcome aboard, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to teach you about Excel, and in the drop-down menu, you're going to click here, and we kind of go through these steps, and we don't really engage our audience. So the change that needs to happen there is, we really have to include our participants as much as possible, because we know adult learners need to participate in order to learn. So otherwise, all that effort that you did and the learning just kind of goes out the window. So the third habit is just I don't want to say the misuse of time, but it's really about, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not, but it's really, I feel like, a pressure to deliver all of our information in a short period of time, and also thinking that you can translate in-person training, like it's equal hours or equal time, and I don't think that's always the case. So we might get pressured. We might think, oh, we have to compress all of this information down into like an hour or an hour and a half, and really not thinking about maximizing our in-session time. So that's where we look at tools like flipped learning. And it's my understanding that you also had you had a session earlier in the year about flipped learning. So I do want to talk about that and hear what your thoughts are about that. Okay, so I'm just going to look at the chat here for a minute, because I see that, oh yeah, Joe says, so that's because we'll never get them back again. So we've got to cover it all exactly. You're like, corral them while we have it. All right, so raise your hands if you are. Let's see, can I see the hand raising? I don't think I can maybe see the hand raising. Yeah, maybe Paul, you can let me know. So raise your hand if you're familiar, with the instructional design process. So is it something that you know about or even have trained on? So Paul, can you just let me know what that
Let's see.
percentage is?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, some people are taking it down now. Looks like we've got about 2/3 that raised their hands.
Okay. So we won't really go into that process, but here's where I, just want to give this high level overview. And this is general, a general process, but, the first step really is where we identify our audience, and then, we're going to define our outcomes. And usually we do an inductive process where we work backwards. We create an outline, we add the learning exercises, and then we might do, review the sequencing and then determine the delivery method. And then of course there's another thing, which is validation, but it didn't look that good in my graphic if I had it in there. So, but just check out where, where, first of all, where delivery method is. It's at the end, okay? And so that's why I was saying, in that where we focus on the software instead of our learners here. A lot of times we kind of start to move this before actually adding the learning exercises. So but the first step that I also think we kind of skip over a little bit is maybe getting a little more, defining our audience really well. And so, if you look at this picture, how much can you tell me about this group of people, right? I mean, not too much. You can see a little bit, but you're not really going to, you're going to get too general about that. So here's a question for you. What are the, if you look at these different roles, what are, some of the different needs of these people? So type that into the chat. So if you have, if you have to do a training on a new process, what might be different between, a manager and customer support, or someone who is in the sales team, or someone who's in the marketing team? What are some of the differences? Haha. D says manager, get to the point. Yep. I mean, a lot of it is what's in it for me, right? The WIFM. What else? Sales, you need to tell great stories fast. Yes, they like a lot of they can be kind of competitive. So they like, I think, a lot of games with competition and things like that. And different roles have different tasks to perform. Yeah. Okay. So you guys get it. So what does each need to do differently? And a new hire might need some limited information, because we don't want to overwhelm them either too. So, um, if I say that, let's say I'm going to build some training around Salesforce, and if I say my audience is all employees who need to learn the new features in Salesforce, is that enough? What do you guys think? Because I think it's easy to. Thanks,
Language.
Michelle. I agree with you. Michelle and I speak the same language, I can tell. So great. Yeah. Yeah. So now, I took that a step further, and obviously, if I get really specific here, I can start to see that, if I know that I'm going to have a mix of roles, or, a mix of different departments, it's going to help me be a little more cognizant of the types of activities that I'm going to include, whether it's in session or out of session. So how many of you, you can just type into the chat, how many of you actually, just take some time to get specific, and, just take a moment and say, okay, you know what, for this training, I'm going to start to write out and, think about who my audience is going to be. Okay, looks like many of you do. Good, 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 good. Oh, good, Susmita. That is my first question to the project requester. Okay. Yeah, and Lynn, to the extent I can know it, I try to. Right. Okay, good. So that, let me see if it's like, if this is even my next slide here, but yeah, this is, so these are some tools that if you don't necessarily have, all the answers right away, or you just can't seem to get them. I just wanted to point out that you can create a survey in which is it's really easy. I don't know if any of you use the survey feature in Google Docs, so it's free. But you can make your questions required, and that's one way that you can send out a link like before your training. I know there are some free versions of SurveyMonkey, and you might even have access to that. Or if you have an internal, um, you know, uh, like what do you call it? Like an internal social media platform, like that's what I call it, Yammer, like Yammer. Or I know people are using Slack, and you might have something similar to that. You may be able to get your get some conversation going before your training that is, or even ask some questions, because I think you can create polls or questions in Yammer, if I remember correctly. But, to start to get a feel, for your audience that way. And it really, it doesn't have to be a lot. It might just be a couple of questions. Any thoughts on that?
So I've attempted to use some polls in some of my content, absolutely. I've done some polls with Google Docs. I find it interesting with respect to webinar training, at least in my organization. A lot of people are of this opinion, hey, I'm just going to sign up and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. That's all I need to do. And so we don't get a lot
Yeah.
of people interested in even trying that poll, or even aware, no matter how many times we send out an email saying, hey, by the way,
Yeah.
there's a poll.
Right. Yeah, it is definitely one of the challenges. And and sometimes I don't know if it takes time, and I don't know, because every organization, the culture is different, right? So if it, takes time for people to either get to know that that is the not the drill, but like this is the engagement, this is the routine that we do when we do training, or even finding the right type of engagement that your culture will best respond to. So it might be hit or miss until you find the right thing. Because
Right.
everyone's talking about micro learning, right? These
Hmm.
little bits and bobs where or trying to create conversation, because I think Michelle was saying she likes creating conversation. So yeah, I mean, if you can do that, um, I think that's great. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a lot. It might just be like one question to get people acclimated to the topic or the training, or maybe have a little game or competition beforehand, something that sort of sets them up, but also helps you hopefully get a little bit of information about them, if you can't do it otherwise. So,
Hmm.
all right. Okay. So then, all right. So engaging your audience, and this is where I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive and look at this sort of translating in-person activities to the virtual environment. And so again, did I pass one of my? Oh, maybe I like deleted one of my slides. Here it is. Okay, so I have this trick that I use, and it's going to sound um, um, like an oxymoron, because I just told you that, so here are the learning exercises, but a lot of times we kind of think about the delivery method first and we put it before the learning exercises, right? But the trick that I do is I actually, so I don't think about the delivery method, because the point is with, creating learning exercises, we really want to look for, what's the performance we want to see, right? So, and for some reason, our creativity opens up more when we sort of pretend it's going to be done in person. So just keep that at the back of your mind. So I don't think about it as, well, I'm going to do this virtually. I really think about what are the performance what's the performance I want to see after, after each section of learning. And so when I'm creating my learning exercises, that's just how I do it. I don't think about, well, I only have chat, or I only have, polls. I just don't think about it that way. And then once I get to the end here, then I'll think about, okay, so now I'm going to be doing this using whatever, Skype for Business or Adobe or GoToTraining, and then I look at my activities and I say, okay, how can I best emulate that in this virtual setting with the tools that I have? So does that make sense for everyone? I just want to check in before we get to this exercise here. Okay, so I've got yes, 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 that makes sense. And then part of this is going to be the flipped learning, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I have this list that I came up with. These are just examples of some engagement methods, and then how it can be done virtually. But so you can take a minute to read this in a minute. But you have in your workbook, if you happen to print it, you have a blank table of this. And what I had asked you to do before this session is just write down some typical um, interaction or activities that you would be doing in person, just to kind of get your creativity going and thinking about it that way. And then what I'd like you to do, kind of looking at some of these examples that I have up, is just take one of those items, that whatever floats your boat, and see how you can, emulate that as much as possible, or, and get creative. And we'll be sharing some of these in a minute. But before I let you go to do this, I want to share a story a mistake that turned into something I will just always remember. But when I was first training and soft skills, and I think it was like conflict resolution or something, and I was doing one of my first trainings up in San Jose at the branch up there, and I had, got to the classroom at 7 in the morning, and I'm getting everything set up. And I think we had one of those videos that, does the bad behavior and the good behavior examples. And I mean, I have been practicing this thing for weeks, and so I pop in the tape and I cue it up, and then I play it just to check and make sure it's queued up, and I realize that the video I have taken from my home was a recording of an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So it was not the video. And so I had been at home practicing with the video from the course. And this is, it's not virtual. I'm in the classroom. I have no way of getting this video to myself. And I thought that's it. Like my career, my career is over. I barely started, and I do this stupid mistake. So I spent about 5 minutes beating myself up and going, "What am I going to do?" But I had I had the kit with me, and I remembered that the script from the video was in the box with it. And I was like, "Well, I think I'm just going to make copies." So I made copies for everyone. I told everyone the story of what happened, and they thought it was hilarious. And I said, "So here's what we're going to do. We're gonna play these out. We're gonna role play instead of watching this video at each section." And I'll tell you, it was the most fun, and they loved it. And so I just thought that I'm going to have to remember, I'm going to have to remember that next time, that sometimes we have to just think outside the box. So that mistake turned into something really good. Okay, so does everyone understand what you're going to do is just take one of your methods there, if you had a chance, or something that you typically do, and just think how you might be able to translate that. And if you have some challenges, you can type those into the chat, and we can always work on those together. So we'll give you like a few minutes to do that, and then we'll check in and see what you've come up with. And when you have actually something written, go ahead and type it into the chat. Oh, I see some really good ideas coming in. Okay, good. These are some really great ideas. And Joe, I hope you're, I see your comment there, so I hope you're getting some ideas too. These are really creative. So it looks like several of you are, uh, creating some activities like outside of the event itself, which is great. Because sometimes we think, if we want to partner up, and I don't really know too many, um, the breakouts in go-to training is scary, and I don't use them. I don't think they work well. And I've used them, I've used them in Maestro, and they work really, really well in Maestro, but the rest of Maestro is horrible. And I don't know how they are in Adobe Connect, because I've heard they're okay in Adobe. Okay. All right. So it looks like we have some really good, I hope you all, sorry, let me finish that first sentence. Looks like we have some really good, good ideas coming in here, and I hope you're getting some ideas from that. Does anyone not kind of still find that, whenever you do this part, that it's still challenging?
How do you mean challenging?
Just, I kind of to what Joe was sort of saying, like, moving beyond polling and kind of coming up with with ideas when you get to, how are you going to create these learning activities in this virtual environment?
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's a comment which I think is a good one from Holly. We have problems with people getting lost when they leave to do small group work or activities. Yeah. Anyone anyone have an idea on that? So Holly is saying we have problems with people getting lost when they leave to do small group or work or activities. That's a good one.
Well, for me, when it's breakout rooms,
Yeah.
I jump into all those, but other ones, yeah,
Yeah, that's the tough one.
yeah, like Michelle said, have the producers go in to check.
Yeah, and instructions too. Oh, and this is a lower tech audience problem. Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that right there, I mean, you might just think for the lower tech, it might not be the best scenario then, or the best activity for them to do, to leave and do some work. I mean, it might be okay for, I'm just thinking out loud here. It might be okay for them to do some, give them some really simple activities before to get them, acclimated to the technology in some way, whatever you're training on, and then still work. Maybe for that group, it's like working together as a group where you have, um, one person who's going to emulate something, a process, let's say, or behavior, and then, or someone else helping to guide that it's kind of done more as a group together. That's like my initial thought on that.
See, Michelle and I do something similar. I see Michelle typing that in the first 5 minutes we do a mini here's where you click on the emoji, etc. Actually, one
Yeah.
of the things that I do is, like you were saying, the basic activity for the first thing I have do is I have people type in the chat box their name, and it helps people
Hmm.
find where the chat box is, as opposed to later when I'm having everyone try to go ahead and type something in the chat box. Um, then there's this wonderful scramble for, "Oh, where's the chat box again?" But in that non-threatening first 5 minutes, oh yeah, I can type my name in there, and we
Right.
can, and some people have it where they've got it set to only type to the attendees, but not to the presenters. So
Hmm.
I never see what they've typed. It's a fun time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it depends on which platform you're using
Right.
too, because some of them have that are real basic, like Skype for Business. You type in the chat, and I think there are only two options in that one. So and everything's in the viewer window, and just like
Yeah.
Adobe Connect, right? Like everything's all in kind of one area. So that kind of that depends on that, and yeah. But sometimes the they're tend you have to do a little more hand holding in the actual, with the actual activities if they're a bit low tech.
Hmm.
And it may be, again, also like once people get more used to the technology and how to do it, so it might be bumpy, the first few times, and then after a while, people start to get used to how that's done. But yeah, so
Hmm.
okay, yeah, but good. Those are good comments. So okay, alrighty, and I might, what, since we, um, the chat log, I don't think I can't remember if I get the chat log, but Paul, you will, and I don't mind putting those in a document and sending them to you, Paul, if you want to send those
Okay.
out, those ideas, I think, because those are some really good ideas that everyone can share with each other.
Absolutely.
So yeah, really good ideas. This is great. This is great. Thank you so much for participating in that. And so I had a question once come up, which I thought was just such a great question, is that, so what do we do, when we have participants with different interests or interests in terms of like, the WIFM or skill levels? So what, and I'm kind of going a little bit before what we're going to talk about next, but what could you potentially do? So if you've got, if you're going to have some activities, I mean, what could you potentially do if you have some different, different types of people in your audience? You might have to get a little creative here. Anyone have any ideas on that? Yeah, okay. Edith nailed it on the head. Hit the nail on the head. Activities set up for different roles. So yeah, I mean, it might take a little bit of extra work, but I think that the payoff is huge. Is where you might say, okay, if you're a manager, here's what the managers are going to do. If you're, or if you're in this department, because everybody's different in what they want to get out of the training, but that will make it a little more specific to them. But that's one of those things that's going to hold somebody's interest, right? Because you are, speaking directly to that. So, and so of course the other piece of that is the flipped learning. And raise your hand if you either attended the session in your chapter around the flipped learning, or if you had a chance to read the article in that pre-webinar handout. And then Paul, if you can let me know what that looks like.
1, 2, 3. So far we've got 6, 7, 8 people. 9. I could put my name up and be 10. I was there.
Okay, so here's where if you, I mean, it's in the pre-webinar preparation. I think it's in there, which is in the materials. So if you haven't read it, you can certainly open it up and read it there. But basically, this was introduced into academia, and it talks about where you're really flipping the lecture, which is presented basically in the form of a video, and then the actual classroom time is whether it's virtual or in person, but is spent more on activities or conversation, and discussion. So or even doing working on homework or anything like that. So once I got wind of this, it really got my wheels turning, because I thought, oh my gosh, we could really use this in virtual training. And of course, I didn't see it as having to provide a video before, but I really was thinking about, oh my gosh, like how can I maximize my in-session time, with this idea. So this is where I wanted to, get a couple of volunteers to just have a little discussion with me and using webcams. So can I get a couple of people who are willing to show their pretty face? And I will certainly show mine. So Paul, let me know if we've got like 2 volunteers would be great.
Well, let's see. I can put my pretty face up there, but I'm sure we want other people other than me.
And we can
Susmita's up
have
there.
we can have more than that too.
There
Michelle
you go.
said
There's
she would
Edith.
do it, and Edith.
There we go.
So okay, cool. Hi.
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, yeah. So the question, I just had a couple of questions. So I mean, if you've, whether you only just heard about this or whether you've known it for a while, like what was your initial reaction when you saw this concept?
For flipped? Is that what you're
Yeah.
referring to?
Hmm.
I thought it was brilliant. I right away was thinking in the classes that I had where I had the autonomy to do this with, I thought to myself, people appreciated it. I did it for one of my virtual classes as an experiment, and we spent more time engaging in actual problem solving and learning because we didn't spend as much time on the the basics basically. And people were able to
Right.
talk about the business and the business impacts. And everybody, the company I work for has different brands. People don't always get that chance to learn about the other brands. So people
Right.
wrote in the survey that they appreciated actually learning about the business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if you can spend more time talking in your session, and of course it depends on the size and how many people you have, but even, like this, like whether it's just audio discussion or webcam, it doesn't matter, and having that engagement so that, because it gives you the time to actually do that, right? And they've been exposed to some kind of information, and again, this may take some time to get people used to this idea, that that's how, when they know they're going to engage with a training with you or your department, that's how it's going to be, and they'll start to look forward to it, I think. So yeah, so thank you for that. Anybody else?
I
Erica,
think
did you? Oh, go ahead.
this is Edith. I think anyone who's a parent and has had to help their children with math problems would love the idea of a flipped classroom so that they can do those math problems that you cannot help them with in school. My daughter went to school down in San Diego area, Torrey Pines, and she took a physics class, and her teacher there, they did everything in the classroom because half these kids couldn't understand what was going on. And so they always did everything in the classroom. They did the lecture, I mean, they might have had a little bit outside, but the whole purpose of the classroom was for them to do the work together, because it was in doing the work that they learned
Right.
and understood the concepts and then the application of it. And I wish when I was in high school, I would have had a teacher like that, because I hated physics because I couldn't understand it. And I think if I had been able to work with some other people on
Yeah.
problems, I would have gotten a lot further.
Yeah, my poor mom, when I would come home with, homework to do theorems and whatever it was in high school, because I loved math, but, she was at a loss, and it's not really her job. And so I would be up until midnight, 1 a.m. as a high school
Hmm.
student, really just trying to slog through, some of the more difficult concepts. So
Hmm.
yeah. Okay. And then uh, I was going to say that, so I was going to say, in terms of like having something, any kind of, does it have to be video, is what I was going to ask, just to make it simple. Do you think it has to be video before your session?
No, I
No,
don't
not
think so.
necessarily.
People use the internet all the time and get all kinds of information. I mean, the internet has replaced newspapers and things like that. People, when somebody wants to learn something, it could be written on the back of a napkin and they'll figure it out because they're motivated about it. So it does not have to be video, although I think video is nice, if you can do that. But I also think reading an article, and there's so much stuff online today. Um, I think just even for a teacher to curate stuff that's out there, like on YouTube, they don't necessarily have to make it up themselves, but
Right.
the instructor would have to take the time to find the materials that are there, and then send people to them. I'm a big proponent in reusing what's already there and don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, because there are some awesome TEDx talks. There are,
Hmm.
people doing micro learning all over, whether it's an infographic, and
Right.
now too, it's gotten so much easier to be less formal. I think years
Hmm.
ago we just felt like we had to be really formal in anything we presented, and now
Hmm.
it's, especially with millennials, it can be really casual. My really dear friend is the product manager for GoToWebinar, and she and her team have just launched GoView, which is, so it's free right now and it's in beta, but you can basically create just 2-minute videos, because that's your
Hmm.
limit. I told her, I was like, Carrie, no, it's got to be 3. I was like, I can't keep it to 2 minutes. But anyway, I mean, you can just create like these, a 2-minute little thing, and pop it up, and, either download that or just even send the link out. So, and then Lynn said, we used to call it pre-learning, and it was written. And I think that it can be a document. It can be, people were saying how they were pairing up groups of people too, right? To maybe outside of, even before your session, say, I want you, like, let's say you're going to do something around customer service. So you might, match two people up, and say, before the session, I want you both to write a script about customer service, and you're going to bring it to the first session, and you're going to role play it, or you're going to share, what you came up with. So you can get so creative and make it so fun. That's why I'm so excited about this concept. So have any of you used it in a way, Erica?
Yeah, I was thinking about that while I was listening to you talk, Corena, and right now, so we have an interesting audience, and I'm kind of bifurcated because I'm currently making material for a very non-tech audience, and we have some existing materials that I inherited for an audience that's a little bit more tech oriented, and so we do a weekly webinar with some trainees, and I didn't really think we were doing flipped learning, but while listening to you talk, I'm wondering if we're sort of, I don't know, like cracking on the surface of it. We do have something that's called some pre-work for them that we want them to do before they get involved in the webinar. I'm not sure that we're necessarily like having them maybe explore something beforehand and then we bring it together and then we all sort of talk about it specifically. So that's where I'm kind of not sure if it's really flip learning, but I am trying to get them to, we bring up the pre-work, we ask them to engage about what they did in the pre-work, and then throughout the webinar, we try to ask a lot of questions. We try to get them to be as engaging as possible so that basically they're giving us the answers through their own experiential storytelling instead of us necessarily, going through the script and then just giving them that information through the script. So I definitely at least try to speak as little as possible to try and get them to give me as much as possible through the prompting questions. And then we kind of bring it together at the end, and there's some post work. And then what I attempt to do is the next time I meet with them, I try to ask them about their week that they've had. How were you able to apply this information?
Right.
In what ways did what we talked about last week help you to go through your week while you were, training and while you were learning to become a manager? So that's why I'm not exactly sure it's flip learning.
No, it sounds like it to me. I think any kind of exposure, where people are having to engage in some way is leading them, on this path. So, yeah, good for you. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it to me. And I know Tom said discussion boards, which I love that idea too. And so I think you can do those in things like, I haven't used Slack. I have access to it through LinkedIn Learning, but I just haven't gotten to it. But so I don't know for any of you who use Slack and I don't know if there are other applications aside from Yammer or maybe even something homegrown, built within your organization, but where you can, do these discussion boards and, put up a thought-provoking question where people can comment because they, and especially
So
with, what was
we
there?
do I do it with UCLA Extension on Canvas. It's basically learning for working people.
Oh,
I teach.
okay.
So I tend to flip it in between, not at the beginning or at the end.
Gotcha.
So in the
Yep.
first week, is bang in between. What I do is let them come and answer the question via webinar. And I give them 5 different points that we're going to cover, and each one chooses one. And I've already given them the videos that they can watch or the information they require. And they've already been getting 3 weeks of information at the back end on concepts and tools. So they can choose any one that they feel they have experience in. And what I ask them to bring to the board is their personal experience using that same concept or tool or having observed it at their workplace. And so that kind of makes them approach it in a different way. They're
Yeah.
personalizing the content.
And they have to be aware, right? So it's not like you just sort of set them loose and say,
Yeah.
go forth, and you really are kind of holding them accountable and saying, so how, they have to start to be conscious of if there's like a new behavior or something, right, that they have to
Yeah.
be, yeah, kind of focused on it. So yeah, so that's great.
Michelle Stribich, I noticed you've got your hand up. Is there a question or comment
Oh,
you wanted
no.
to make? Okay.
No, I just didn't take it down. Sorry, it's down now.
All right. I thought I'd gotten them all down. So okay, excellent. Just wanted to make sure we
Sorry.
weren't ignoring you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then Tom also said that many LMS environments have good forums and discussion boards like Moodle, I guess, if that makes sense to people. So it's been a really,
Success
yeah,
Factors has a thing called Jam that they use. One of the interesting components with discussion boards is, again, it falls within the culture. We've got so many different
yeah,
areas. You could just as easily use email as a discussion board, and in our organization, probably that's the only way we can get something like that taken care of, because to get people to actually leave their email to have a conversation online anywhere else is tantamount to pulling teeth and fingernails at the same time.
yeah. Have you guys in your chapter, have you had I'm blanking on her name right now, but she's the co-founder of um um I just saw her on is it Training Clinic or
Jean
Training
Barbizet?
Warehouse? Training
Training Clinic
Warehouse?
is Jean Barbizet.
Yeah, no, Training Warehouse, like the one that has all the toys and games, and does that sound familiar to anyone? You know what? I'll look it up and send it to you, Paul, because the reason why I'm bringing this up is she does a great, I've heard her present before, and she talks a lot about creating really marketing your training and your training team. So it's sort of like you're creating your own, you're being an entrepreneur within your organization as the training department, and where you can really start building some plans and tooting your own horn about what it is that you do, what your goals are for the year. You're creating your own messaging. It was really compelling the way she presented that. So that's something you guys may want to think about having. I think she spoke for ATDLA. I think we had her once come and present, but it's just that when I hear those things about the challenges, within an organization and getting people on board, and whether it's decision makers that are above us, or just engaging our colleagues and whatnot, sometimes I like this idea too, where you're starting to create your own marketing plan, so to speak, and really get your name out there as to what it is that you do, and what how you're there to help the organization, and help the organization's bottom line. So it's kind of a neat idea, but yeah, I hear you, Paul. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Any other comments about about flipped learning, and how you might use it in your organization? Anyone in the chat have a question about flipped learning, or any comments and that we can talk about before we get to our last section? Oh, I see some names coming in. Sue Landy. I feel like her name is
It's
not
actually
Michelle.
Sue Dr. Landy. So looks like it's the
Yeah.
whole thing there. I'm pulling it off the website.
Yeah, I feel like it's Training Warehouse, and maybe her name is like Marcia somebody or other, but she's the one, but I'll have to look it up and see. And I feel like I just saw her on, oh, I know, it just came through on, I think through Training Magazine, through my email. I think she's doing a presentation, not on that, but that is one of the topics that she talks about.
All right, I'm looking at the Training Warehouse site. We can move on
Yeah.
because we're hitting close to the time.
Okay, so just a couple of things then. So thank you all so much for playing along with me. I appreciate that. And hopefully that also gives you an idea, when it's just something to consider when you're doing your own training is, you know, having a little section on there where you can have some discussion using webcam, and just to switch it up a little bit. It doesn't have to be webcam if you don't want. It can just be, you know, audio, but it does, you know, create a little bit more interest when we can see faces and people having a discussion. So I wanted to share that example. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing webcam, and then we can just, hi, Paul.
I guess I'm going to get off too.
Yeah. All right. So we kind of talked about this. There are some examples, but you know, I think like Edith said, I mean, there are just so many different things that you can curate that are out there online. And you know, a lot of different things that you can do, and so it doesn't have to be just before. It was like Susmita talked about, doing things in between your session. That's also another idea. Or you can also do some follow-up by creating some activities after your session as well. So all right, just some quick tips on managing in session, and I think most of you will actually understand this, but you know, you're probably breaking up your content when you're training virtually and breaking it up every whatever. You can type into the chat, like, how many minutes do you go before you actually break to do some sort of activity or engagement? So I'll just ask that first. And we're almost done here. All right, so we've got every 5 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, 15 to 20 max. Yeah, okay, so I wanted to get to the 15 to 20 max. And I think we've all either been taught that or we just know that as trainers. And I came across some really interesting information that they've actually done some scientific studies to prove what we've been saying this whole time. So so there are studies in neuroscience that show the hippocampus, which is our memory, that's our memory guy. It acts like this memory stick here, and it says that we can only hold so much information before that information has to be processed and then pushed into short-term memory. So once it does that, then it's ready for more. And the maximum amount is about 20 minutes of information. That's what we all knew. So the rule of thumb, of course, is to break up your content in around 15 minutes of information and then add a processing activity like discussion, even a period of reflection. Even just asking people to think about something is really all you need. So you know, it doesn't have to always be an experiential activity, and even a 2-minute break is part of that too. So I just wanted to call that out. You know, slide decks, I know that a lot of times we're bound by our company templates. And so, but if at all possible, you know, creating them, just making sure there's a lot of free space. I give myself the challenge, no bullet points. Because I kind of started looking at, you know, what marketing people were doing, because they kind of have to do some similar things. They have to hold someone's attention in their webinar, right? So I started looking at, well, what are they doing, you know, in their slides? But you know, you can always, I'm thinking, ask your, your marketing department, hey, could you create us, you know, a template, you know, with our branding, with, you know, 3 or 4 different example, or 3 or 4 different slide templates for us to use for a training scenario, because maybe ours is different, where we really want to fill our decks with, fill our slides with images, or, you know, somehow, you know, just have a lot of free space and things like that. So I just wanted to call out that idea, because I think you all know the drill about how many bullet points per slide. Okay, and then you know, if you're not already doing this, definitely, you know, setting the expectations to let your participants know, you know, that you do expect them to interact with you and each other. And I think you're all probably familiar with that 80-20 rule. And you know, I will call on people if I haven't heard from them, and you can, you know, I can vibrationally hear their head snap to attention. So, you know, I have no problem with doing that, and I just set it up at the beginning that, you know, we're all here to, you know, whether it's to get through this or, you know, I want to make this as engaging for you as possible, but I do need you to also, you know, engage with me. And then if I don't hear from people, I will call on them. And then lastly, just I go old school, and I always create like some kind of a handout or workbook. I don't care if people are doodling in there. I just want them to, and I usually create handouts that have, part of the information missing, meaning they have to fill out the rest. So I don't give them everything, and it's really old school but there've been a lot of studies around people and memory and having to write in, the answers or as they follow along with you, or write down notes or do something with their hands, and writing as they're, participating in the training. So I definitely do that. Okay, so I don't think we're really going to have time for a review because I want you to be able to go, but I wanted to ask just one last time if there are any questions that you have about, about anything that we talked about in this session, and you can certainly ask it verbally. Just reading through the chat here. Anything? Okay, Paul, do you have any final comments?
I've got a question, if I
Yeah,
can ask. It's Michelle.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, other than using obviously there's the polls, the chat, the whiteboard. Let's say you've got, how in the live classroom you do the flip chart, right? They get up there, they do their flip chart, you come back, you debrief. In a virtual setting, I can stick them in a room to do the breakout. And granted, we can do the verbal or the chat debrief, but I'm curious, has anyone or have you brought them back and said, okay, now we're gonna, like if they whiteboarded it, could you bring that back into the main classroom to see everyone's whiteboard? And I don't know if that's a functionality thing to look up with the tool, or if it's something that actually can be done, because that would be similar to people seeing the flip chart in the live classroom, just virtual version. I didn't know if you'd ever bumped into something like that, or if anyone had, because it's something I would love to try.
Yeah, and so I'll ask, if anyone in the audience has some ideas, and then what tool do you use?
So I'm in Adobe Connect. They go into the breakout
okay.
room. We bring them. Yeah, so it would be Adobe Connect. Yep. And they do have a whiteboard feature. I just don't know how to do that in the main room or bring everybody's whiteboard into the main room so everyone can see everybody.
Oh,
So
okay. Is
let me do
anyone
this.
familiar with that?
Let me
Go ahead.
do this just as an idea here. And I'm going to say that's an excellent question. And I'm going to be cognizant of everyone's time. That involves us trouble in stepping through platforms. I do believe that the answer is yes, you can do that in Adobe Connect. I do believe the answer is yes, you can do that in WebEx Training Center. Corena seems skittish about breakout rooms inside GoToTraining, so I don't know exactly how I'm going to answer on that one. But here's the thing. If, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, you enjoyed today's session and you say, my gosh, there was so much information, I need to explore more. I want to give you a heads up that coming in May, we're going to give us that opportunity to explore more. Okay, and we're going to call this the Trainer's Casebook. It's a tool that we used earlier where we have case studies and we addressed certain issues. And what I'm doing right now, excuse me, is I'm putting down here a note to say breakout rooms bring over user-generated content, because user-generated content is a huge key for what we're trying to work off of. And the more, this chat box that we have here, how many of you want that chat box? That's user-generated content. And the ability to go ahead and take that and work with that and do something with it is huge. So how do we bring over user-generated content from breakout rooms? And I'll make sure that we have some sort of conversation that addresses that, because I know it's possible in different platforms.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah. Because the sort of slap together, with I agree. I feel like I sense that there's something in Adobe that you can do that, but if you're in a different platform, Skype for Business has whiteboard, but you would have to, I don't think they have breakouts, but I can't remember, but definitely someone can do it on a, put it together on a, one person is documenting on a Word document, but that would mean just sort of screen sharing and, taking turns and then just making sure you send it out afterwards. That's like the, that's the, patch it up with a rubber band and glue version. But yeah, that would be, I guess, some ways to do that. So
So
great. Okay. Yeah,
Michelle's
go ahead.
asking if you have a book blog on virtual engagement tips. So I am, of course, pointing on the screen to your website. And you
I
do have a blog, but you have not been typing on it most recently.
I have not. I know. I am in that conundrum of I am working so much that I can't even pay attention to my own website. And and so it's in the plan, in my plans to, get to a point where I can actually write again. Sometimes I write on LinkedIn because I feel like LinkedIn is sort of where my peeps hang out with
Mm.
regard to learning and development. And so sometimes I write on there, but it's so funny because I was thinking of, should I write a book on tips? And I'm like, aren't there already a lot out there? And so I don't know, but maybe I'll think about it. But thank you for asking that. I appreciate that. And but thank you so much though for everyone really for participating and including your comments and questions in the chat. I really appreciate it. And I thank you, Paul, for reaching out to me to do this session. It was really fun.
Oh, no, thank you, Corena, for actually volunteering your time and your knowledge. I truly do appreciate everything that you've shared with us here. Folks, I'm hoping that you can also see my screen because I'm going to wrap up with a few final comments. Let me see here if this is working. So yes, Corena's got her website, Your Revenue Guru. Is it revenueguru.com or yourrevenueguru.com? Let me see. It's right there on the
Uh,
URL at the top.
your webinar
Your
guru, the
Revenue.
other one was taken.
Yell at them.
Isn't that always
So
the case?
yourrevenueguru.com. She's got a website. You can see she's got a whole bunch of different courses. She's got some consulting gigs. She's making a fantastic living out of this, and I truly do appreciate her expertise in sharing. Folks, I do want to go ahead once again plug the coming in May. I don't think y'all are seeing this. Share my screen. Yes,
Well, I see the coming in May, the
you
trainer's
do.
casebook.
I'm not seeing it on my other piece. All right, so
Yeah,
if you're seeing it, we're good. I'm going to stop
yeah.
sharing my webcam to make sure everyone can see it. So coming in May, we've got the trainer's casebook. I already talked about that. One of the things I truly hope that you're able to get from this is, we talked about flipped learning in January. We're talking about webinars now, and we brought flipped learning into that conversation. We're going to talk more about blended learning, and we're really trying to keep this conversation going. We're not doing really one-off sessions anymore. We're hoping that you're going to be able to take something from each of these webinars or each of these learning events and find ways to build on the larger concept and the larger conversation. And this May, I think, will be kind of the capstone for the first half of the year with respect to the trainer's casebook and the blended learning. So we'll kind of weave this all together. I hope everyone who's on the call here today, and even those of you who dropped off because it's heck late, you're able to come in and take part in that. If you did enjoy this webinar, I do want to state that there's never been a better time to join our community. Again, thank you for Karen and Terry, and I think Tiffany was one of the other names who had said that they were new members and joined us. Absolutely. Please be a part of our membership and tell your friends about this. Tell your friends about these things. We've got members only events. We've got special interest groups that are free to members. We've got wonderful opportunities for you to explore the talent and development community. And while you're at it, by all means, find an opportunity to explore what it means to be a power member. You're a member of ATD National, which has all this research and all this knowledge and everything that you can probably tap into. And then you've got the chapter, which is the community of practice that finds ways to take all that research and all that knowledge and distill it into an environment where you can toy with it and see how you can utilize it in your job, as opposed to just reading about it and then saying, well, that sounded interesting. That's what a power membership is. You've got the knowledge and skills and the research with national, and you've got the community to help us process it and figure it out within the local chapter. So by all means, take a look at those opportunities there. Ask any board member if you want to learn more. And chapter membership keeps me connected with great people like you. And ATD gives me, membership gives me access to practical knowledge and great resources. That's kind of what I just said, so I'll move on from that. More members of ATD membership, magazine, member discounts on publications and conferences, annual State of the Industry report. We should share something about that. Just came out like, what, 5 months ago. The communities of practice is a recent thing that they've expanded within AT membership, and I need to explore that a little bit more because you've got these different, again, communities where people talk and go for more about this stuff. Now, I had a question that I asked everyone inside the reminder notice, and I'm hoping those of you who are hanging out, thank you for hanging out. You can type something in here. I'm going to go through the chat box and figure out what things are in there, but I want you to think of a time when you experienced a challenge facilitating a webinar. How did you handle it? And if you could share some of those stories in the chat box, that would be a great and wonderful thing. Full confession, some of this is going to feed our May learning event. And if there's nothing else and you don't want to participate in that, you don't want to share that, I, again, thank you all, everyone on this call, for your time and your patience. I hope you have a great rest of the evening. I look forward to seeing you all in May. I hope you go to ATD ICE and see what's going on down in San Diego. Corena, are you going to be there?
I am not going to be at that one. I'm thinking about the Chicago, something coming up in Chicago in October, but yeah, for this year, no, I'm not.
Okay.
I wish.
Well, I was going to tell everyone to go there. But all right. So you've got ATD 2018, the International Conference and Exposition. By all means, check that out if you haven't heard of it and see what we've got as an option there. Corena, again, thank you for your time. Folks, thank you for your time. I'm going to hang on here if you have any questions to ask me. Otherwise, have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you so much, Paul. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Paul.
Susmitha, hang on the line a little bit if you can. And
Sure,
Jeffrey, if you can too, hang on the line for a little bit.
How do I get out of this? I'm going to exit. Sorry.
So Paul,
Let me
it's
stop it.
Denise.
Yes. Hi, Denise.
Leave.
Hi there.
Leave.
Communities of Practice is their new